Hello everyone. I'm going live for the first time ever on my Instagram live. I'm going to talk to Mila Jam. Hopefully she's going to join me any minute, and that would be marvellous. Oh look, there's lots of you here. Let me just check my connection. Wow, there's loads of you. Hello everybody. Now hopefully we can get a hopefully. Still waiting for Mila to log on here, people, but it won't be too long. Oh, you are all lovely, aren't you? Sending lots of lovely messages. Hey!
Hey!
How are you, honey?
It's good to see you.
You too.
It's been so long.
I was. Yeah, for people watching, we've never actually met before.
We've never met. This is our first time.
We've never actually met, but I feel like I know you, Mila.
You do. You know my people, and
I do.
I'm so proud to be a part of this conversation with you, and just thank you.
Well, I'm
first
just
of all.
happy to keep having conversations at the moment because it feels like a time that we really should be.
And you know what? I wanted to say this, first of all, to start this whole conversation. Hi, everyone. I'm Mila Jam, if you don't know who I am. Singer, songwriter, actress.
Extraordinaire. Put on the end. Always put.
Extraordinaire.
Yeah.
But I want to say that you have been making space. You have been giving space to Black and brown people continuously. You're still doing it. I come back to your page, and every time I come back, you're still doing it. And I just want to say thank you for being a part of the continuous conversation instead of the advantageous conversation or the conversation that just fills in a few gaps.
Well, thank you very much, Mila. I mean, obviously, when Brandon started doing his videos, because for people watching, the reason that Mila and I know each other is because she did a Black Talks conversation with Brandon, and that whole series has been amazing. It's been really amazing, and it is that thing. Brandon and I talked about this in the very first instance. It was like everyone feels like they want to talk and converse about this.
Yeah.
But the trouble is that people get tired.
People get tired, and we're human.
And they try and they think about moving on with their life and stuff. And with COVID, which hasn't gone away, by the way, people, it's still very much here. But it gave us all a chance to stop and not be distracted by other things. And I wouldn't say forced into conversation, but there was an opportunity there for people to sit and think and reflect.
Honestly, I believe it was lightning in a bottle. Being able to have this moment where we're all on the same page. We're like having conversations. We're actually seeing the things that need to be worked on in our culture. And I think it's slipping away from us. I think right now we're really, really at this new phase
Oh God,
of the experience where it's slipping away and we're losing the momentum and people are getting weary and getting tired and what really matters and what's important as people sort of find a way to get back to their lives, you know?
yeah. Well, and also I think people's focus is shifting towards in the States as well. It's shifting towards November and the election. And that's why I think
Yeah.
this conversation is just as important as it always has been. This is why we
Yeah.
have to have these conversations, because the people in power are not willing to do that. They're willing to
Yes.
kind of buy into people's, well, unfortunately, the president of America at the moment uses divisiveness and fear as a tool to try and get people on side. And that is something that stops any conversation, stops any will to understand, want to understand,
Yeah.
and it just, you know, it taps into people's base fears. And you know, the whole world seems to be guided by fear at the moment, and that is, you know, for me, who's someone who doesn't like that kind of thing, you know, it wants people to be positive and at least try and, you know, exude the best we can out of each other.
I agree. How are you doing at this moment? Let's check in with each other
Oh,
first
come
of
on, let's
all.
check in.
Let's
Let's check in.
just check in. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. It's, you know, COVID has affected everybody in different ways, and like me, the biggest thing for me is that like I don't see my children very much at the moment.
Yeah.
So that was tough, and I went through a big period of time where I didn't see them, and that was horrible. But you know, I've had a couple of trips now and seen them, and that tops that cup up. And you know, we start back on Lucifer in a couple of weeks, so I've got to get my head in the game again and remind
Yeah.
myself
And get
what it
back
is that I
into
actually
it.
do.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
know, how are you?
I'm a little topsy-turvy.
Hmm.
I've actually had someone very close to me just go through COVID.
Oh
And
gosh.
it has been a roller coaster because I was not sure how they would make it through.
Hmm.
But they're doing much better and they
They're doing
are
okay.
doing okay. And this smile is specifically because of that.
Oh, good.
I'm so happy. But it has been a roller coaster ride and checking in with myself. And someone asked me the other night, like, how am I doing with my self-care? And I've been marching and I've been protesting and continuing to show up for trans rallies and activist rallies and Black Lives Matter rallies and continuing to just try to be like in my world, I'm trying to like make sense of the new version of this semi-normal, which
Yeah.
is no longer complete lockdown, but like moderate lockdown with heavy masks,
Yeah.
heavy masked traveling
Mm.
and trying to just as you go, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm good in this moment.
Good.
I'm very good in this moment, and I'm very happy to be just having this. Hey, this is the first time everyone is witnessing us bloom this friendship. So I'm excited for that.
It is weird, isn't it? It does feel like you've got to take it a day at a time.
Yeah.
Like even like an hour at a time. Sometimes it feels like at the moment.
So it's like a minute at a time, an hour
Yeah.
at a time. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so what I really wanted to do, tonight was just to have an open and honest conversation, as you've been doing with a lot of other friends, just about like continuing the conversation and rolling the ball as it pertains to some of the things that I've seen in your conversation with Brandon. Shout out to Brandon K. Good. We love Brandon. Woo! Thanks for connecting us, Brandon.
It was amazing.
But and also congrats to season 5 of your show. I know this is like, I'm
Thank you.
getting in. Yes, congrats to all of that stuff. Yes. But just, I watched one of your conversations with Brandon and I actually just noticed that you posted or that Coleman Domingo, who's a very close, good friend of mine. I love Coleman. We're related through so many people.
No way.
But I love Coleman, and it was so nice to see him on your page. But just in general, like the conversation you had with Brandon, specifically some things that, you mentioned about when I was having the conversation with him and parenting and talking about the things. I would love to let's go through some of the things. You said you had some moments of awakening and some moments of realizing you didn't think of this way before, and what changed for you, and what has that journey been like for you up until this point, and how I just need like to start off.
Well, it's continuous. Like the journey is continuous, is what I would say. It's like I think I think part of the problem, Mila, is that a lot of people are scared to say the wrong thing, right? And
Yeah.
people that want to do better and be better and learn and educate themselves, they're kind of crippled with fear
Yeah.
about you know, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, you know, being outed by people, and you know, for misspeaking or whatever. And that's what I've enjoyed about these conversations, is that we need a safe place. We can't pretend that everyone knows everything,
Yeah.
right? And we can't assume that everyone is just gonna, once they've heard something, go, oh right, okay, I've changed the way that I think.
Yeah.
Um,
And it is trial and error. I mean,
it is trial and
no
error.
one's gonna be perfect. You know, you're not gonna get things completely right the first time. And I always say that it's okay to make a mistake, but if you're genuine, you know, with your actions and with
Yeah.
your purpose, you know, it will make a difference.
Well, mistakes are good if you learn from them. I mean, someone who
Yeah.
you know, continually makes mistakes and it's the same one over and over, then that's when you need to start like looking at it. But no one's perfect in this situation. So I think, you know, one of the things that came up about parenting, for example, was about kind of, and I think all parents do this in a way. They kind of want their child to be some kind of reflection of them.
Yeah.
And the truth is, they always will be. Children will always be a reflection of you. But the trouble is that if it isn't if what is being reflected isn't something that the parent understands or is cool with, or you know, is not, you know, that have grown up in a society that doesn't have a want to understand
Yeah.
that, you know, people's identity, and you know, if someone feels a certain way, that's cool, and to not sort of jump on that and you know, try and direct them.
Yeah, it's the nurturing, and it's like you said, I think you mentioned something that I was alluding to, was you being able to facilitate who they are and who they will become, as opposed to what they become.
Yeah.
And that's the goal.
Yeah. And it gets often tangled up with the parents' wants and the parents' aspirations.
So I do have a question that will break this up a little bit,
Let's do it.
because this has been on my mind. So as a Black woman that happens to be trans, there are a lot of conversations around gender reveals and gender reveal parties. And I don't know if you've just heard about the one that happened in California that
set off a
created
fire.
this huge fire.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on gender reveal parties?
I mean, honestly, I think that and so I have to say that America is probably guilty of this more than anywhere else in the world. They really like to stretch events out. So, like, I got remarried last year, and the series of events leading up to the wedding, I thought the wedding was like the do, was like the bash.
Yeah.
But there was like all these other things that were expected to happen up to it, and so the same with having kids these days. And you know, it used to be like you'd have, you know, a baby shower was a new thing for me a few years ago.
Yeah.
But now it's like a gender reveal party. It's just, I don't know. I don't really understand why people want to eke it out, other than it's people getting more presents for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I do think it kind of goes along with this tradition of like people choosing that they want to have some child represent their own identity or version of themselves, i.e., you know, a man wanting a son or a woman wanting a daughter. And instead of creating this space or this celebration for the child without dictating who they are and who they're going to become, it makes people feel comfortable. And I'm trying to figure out, how do we tell people to stop celebrating the one thing that makes people so excited to celebrate
Exactly.
when they're having a child?
Well, because my feeling about it is like, at that point in the equation, who cares? Like, really,
I agree.
Who's the news for?
I
Like,
agree.
obviously parents like to find out because they like to prepare a little bit in terms of painting bedrooms and stuff like that. But it's, you know, even that, you know, it used to be a few years ago when I was having my children, that people would say, have you found out the sex? And if you said, yeah, we have, people would be a bit like, oh, we didn't want to find, yeah, what is it, who? But also they were a bit surprised that you wanted to find out. Because even that felt like a
really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, so I'm faced with that kind of, and that, you know, the old school kind of like, you know, the lady's just had a baby. You find out in that moment what gender the baby is. I mean, that's...
So wait, you're telling me that people would be surprised that you would even want to know?
Yeah, some people, because I like superstitions.
That is so un-American.
I know.
Oh my God, I just like this is a moment for me because this is something, especially coming from the Black community.
Yeah.
Your pride as a parent is usually based on what you're having, and it's always looked at as an other slash alternative thing if you are a Black person having a child and saying, you know, I don't want to know the gender of the baby. People look at you sort of like, well, that's weird. Like, well, why
Hmm.
don't you want to know? Because everyone wants to partake in the the continuous tradition of like, I'm going to bring pink stuff. I'm going to bring blue
Yeah.
stuff. I'm going to bring things. Because I had this conversation. I had this conversation recently with my mom. Okay.
Okay.
And shout out to you, Mama Jam. We love Mama Jam. Mama Jam is my mom. And she kisses to Mama Jam. We have been able to go through this journey of her love and support for me has been unwavering throughout the journey of not agreeing with who I am, me discovering who I am, me embracing that and my womanhood and living in that and being steadfast in that truth, and then her coming back around to being like, I love you. And it's not even just I love you because you're my child, but I love you because you know who you are. And
Hmm.
I see that, and she gets it. So now having conversations about children and gender reveal parties is very interesting because I can even tell when she and I talk about it, the conflict of interest where as a parent, she's like, well, that's what you do. You get the child and you get everyone to, bring the
Hmm.
gifts. It's because they want to know what they're going to bring for the child. So
Hmm.
I know what gifts to bring.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but mom, it's really less about like what color clothing I should bring, or if I should bring a suit and a tie versus a frilly dress. It shouldn't really be about that. It should be
Hmm.
about whatever. She did tell me, and I didn't know this, that when I was born, there wasn't a color. I think my baby shower was colored. It was neutral.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, there you go. So like, and I think she said it was like neutral. I think my baby shower was yellow or was green or something,
Hmm.
and it was neutral. And so a lot of this just kind of gets taken down to simple, like in my opinion, ridiculous like things that people just. I want to buy a pink dress, and that's what I need to know if you tell me what the gender of the baby is. Versus,
Yeah.
we should be bringing things that are just about the baby's health and not catering, because it becomes a competition. It
Yeah.
becomes a competition of guys versus girls, men versus women. I'm a guy, I have a son. I'm a girl, I have a
Hmm.
daughter. I want them to look like me. And then children become dolls, and children are not
Well, they
dolls.
do. Well, of course, and because who's it for? Like again, who are these parties for? They're for the adults. The
For the
kid, like,
adults. And
it's
then,
when you have a kid, they don't remember their birthday party until they're about 5 years old.
yeah, they
It's
don't know.
always for the adults, and in the UK, it's always normally for the adults to get together and get drunk. 'Cause
Yeah, yeah,
but it's like so again, it's about that expectation. It's
yeah.
about what the path that you're laying for your child.
But it's also about validation and
Yeah.
affirmation, because these heteronormative things that sort of take precedence are because people feel there's a safety net. And that, when a lot of people just need to feel right based on collective social ideals, how they feel, this is what people do. You go to the restaurant and you eat this, you get this order. It's like people thinking for themselves is really difficult, especially here in the States.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have herd mentality, and they
Hmm.
don't want to think for themselves or individually. And
Yeah.
that just doesn't create enough space or balance for people to say, because I'm a person that identifies on the binary. Hello, it sounds strange, but like, as much as I love the queer and the trans and the LGBTQIA plus community, I'm a woman. And it just happens that I was born in a different form.
Hmm.
But I understand that there's space that's important for non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, and people who don't subscribe to the gender binary. And
Yeah.
so I think the question for me is like, let's create more of a space for those children to not be forced into being something that they just have to completely fight their way out of
Yeah.
as they grow up.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's divided like that at birth, isn't it? And I was talking to my wife about this yesterday, just saying, the concept of gender and talking about gender, and like in everything that we do in society, in life, there is always, any sort of questionnaire or form that you have to fill in. It's like date of birth and then gender, male, female, and it's all very linear. Everything is very, very linear.
So what is your experience? Because this is our 100th time hanging out.
Yeah.
What is your experience with, do you have any trans people in your life?
I don't have any trans people in my immediate circle, no.
Yes, you do.
Well, I do now, Mila. There we go.
There you go.
I do now.
And what has been, I know there's so much that you probably never thought of, or that was something I heard you say in the conversation with Brandon, but like, what is that like in terms of realizing there's a whole group of people that have been overlooked, even from your perspective? And have you ever felt threatened? Have you ever felt afraid of, or in any way, I guess the word is threatened, by anyone who's trans or LGBTQ plus?
Never ever have I felt threatened in that sense. I think the way that certainly I was brought up, I grew up in the church, so like
same.
I didn't have a lot of people that weren't like regulatory kind of white Christians around me, and it just wasn't part of my world. Okay, and I think that people, there were issues that I uncovered later on as a teenager in the church to do with homosexuality, and people struggling with that concept. Still, which is just like
to this day, it's like, why?
And it's sort of, you have to kind of ask yourself why people are so kind of wired in the way that they are. Yeah. And
but I also think that's because people are looking for answers that are usually false it's not rooted in truth, and it's like I don't know, it's a way for people to feel they belong, and unfortunately the incorrect way to belong, I think, as we are people and we need to be in tribes and we need to be around each other, it's a backward way of thinking that you have to push people away because of something because of their difference, or something that doesn't look like it should, whatever you think it should be.
Well, it's like fear. It's like you're afraid. It's like, what's going to happen? And that, as you were talking about when you're talking with Brandon, that comes from people's ignorance. It comes from people, like, their fear.
And it really it really is a testament to what you said about thinking about God and how God is not about, it was something you said that was about, oh God, it was a beautiful moment. It was about how people who use God to basically justify that God is not an all-loving entity. Why wouldn't God love everyone? Yeah. That's the point.
Well, it's like the religion side of things is something that I've sort of lived with my whole life, and still trying to wrap my head around it, because I think there are some huge fundamental things within not just Christianity but all religions that are great in terms of promoting peace and tolerance and understanding. Unfortunately, I feel like humanity has, got its filthy hands on it, and it becomes about the preferences of the people that have formed that church, and not about what the fundamentals of the church are. I think, it's strange. Like, I was thinking about why because I think I said on that chat with Brandon, I'd said I felt I was someone who was cool about everything, and when you guys talked, I was like, I say that I'm cool about everything, but really, if I really, really ask myself, am I cool about it? I don't know if I'm cool.
But guess what? That's not even your fault.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why do I think that way? So I was trying to break it down. Yesterday, I was having a little think about this, and for example, like one thing that I can sort of draw to from the UK experience, right? Yeah. Which is something that gets grained into kids in the UK. Every Christmas, there is we have a Christmas show in the theatres called pantomime, right? And a lot of Americans think that is to do with actual miming, and it's nothing to do with miming at all. A pantomime is a Christmas play that is traditionally done every year in every different theatre, and they get like some, you know, some decent celebrities to play various parts, and it's always a fairy tale. It's always a reimagining of a fairy tale, and there's always like stock characters. Whatever the fairy tale is, there's stock characters, and the main stock character in a UK pantomime is the pantomime dame, and that is a man dressed as a woman. And making some very kind of like suggestive jokes, and it's all very knowing. It's like the audience all know it's a man dressed as a woman, and sometimes it leans towards a very camp portrayal of a man. And sometimes when I worked in Scotland, it's the other end of the spectrum, and you're very much never mistaken that this is a man playing a woman. It's often he's got a beard or whatever as well, you know. And it's like that is something that still happens now. And it's a figure of fun, and it's you're sharing a joke constantly with the audience about the weirdness of that situation, right? It
sort of reinforces.
Yes, it reinforces, and it not even reinforces, because there's kids that go there. You know, kids go with their schools and blah 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 every year. So you're talking most kids in the UK will go and see a pantomime a few times in their life leading up to like the age of 15. And that is just a slow drip of this kind of like skewiffed view of something. And I understand where it's come from in tradition, but I feel like that when you understand traditions elsewhere as well, it's like it always points towards people being like a figure of fun, and like the clowns and the people you laugh at.
This is something we've experienced.
It's endemic.
Yeah,
it's endemic.
It's something we've experienced here in the States too, with all of the things that you do. It's like, you know, at the sporting games, at sporting events, at all of these different places, you know, you go to be around people and to be around family, and you're just constantly reinforced into thinking like, you know, there's a strong binary, obviously. There's, you know, men are here and do this, and the women all go over here and do this. And even as a kid, when I was growing up, it was always like, I always knew who I was. I didn't have the vocabulary for it. So the journey of like having a trans child or someone, this is way before we even had all of these conversations. It's like amazing to me that there are actual, you know, trans youth that can be expressive and know who they are, and actually say that and have people understand that. That was not the case for me growing up. So for me, it was like, all right, I know how I feel. I know who I am. I know the group that I most identify with, which were the girls and the women. So whenever I was forced to be a part of men's activities and men's things, it was always a nightmare. I remember being in dressing rooms with men in shows and theatrical performances, and being like, I just don't think I need to be in this room. That is a very elementary version of this, but like, when I would go out with people, or when I would have groups of friends, it would primarily be with women, and I would just feel like one of the girls. And everyone understood that, and everyone got that on some sort of level. And so it's interesting when we're talking about how, you know, people negating, you know, someone's like the reality of transness, trans people, trans women being women, trans men really being men. We're still like having to push the truth about we are who we say we are. And there's so many things that always counter that every single day in dating and meeting people, we're always having to constantly waste energy and time on trying to support those things when we could be focused on so many more important things about connecting with each other. And you know, how you and I are connecting through friends and through conversation, and it's able to make space for each other. It doesn't have to be about your gender or what that means. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does completely. It does completely make sense. And again, it's like that. It's that. I think about like my wife is Jewish, and you know, you go to synagogue, exactly the same thing. The men on one side, the women on the other. It's always this kind of separation and forced identity. And
but I do think it's very simple, though. And let me just say this, because in this world, I struggle with the idea that the binary will completely go away. And I know this is a conversation because I do believe that in some capacity, the future is fluid. The future is,
Hmm.
non-binary, at least for the children and for people, kids coming up. But it is interesting because I don't think there's anything wrong with identifying on the binary and knowing who you are to be, but it's the lack of making the space
Yeah.
for anyone else
Yeah.
in that realm. There is a spectrum of identities and a spectrum of sexualities and sexual expressions.
Yeah.
And, I have a very good friend of mine that I've been learning things about, and he is someone who I've just basically realized identifies as fluid,
Hmm.
meaning that it's not even about being gay or being straight. It's just about he is
Just about
able to
being.
to be and
Yeah.
to, if you make a connection with someone and you enjoy their whoever they are, their company or
Yeah.
whatever, you can love them for that, which I think is totally
I
plausible.
think that, well, I think that's amazing, and I think all power to that, because I think that is what I hope we can all push towards in terms of a fluidity about gender in the future. I think we're in the process at the moment of like a generational. There's a couple of generations that we're working on at the moment. Mine being one, certainly the ones before me, and I would say that like my wife, who's probably is generation after me, is certainly more aware and woke,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in that sense. And then like this will hopefully be good news for you. But my daughters, her generation, she talks about stuff, and I'm like, what does that mean? And she educates me but it's
Yeah,
great that she's got this kind of like appetite for it. Again,
yeah.
she's a theatre kid. I remember you talking about that. That was the place where you found the most acceptance,
The
and
theater.
yeah, which is I loved that what you said actually about the fact that actors have to kind of you have to have empathy to be an actor because you have to try and
Yes.
understand someone else's
But
position.
you
Someone,
come into the craft with an awareness and an acceptance
yeah,
of the space is going to be, you're going to be dealing with all types of people and you're going to be dealing with all types of characters, because I don't know about you, but
yeah,
when I got into acting, the beauty of it is like I get to read something and become someone that may or may not be like me.
yeah,
So even if I don't identify that way, I can be excited about, learning something new about
yeah,
someone
totally.
else and someone else's way of thinking. And it's also, I think, very important that like, I think about this all the time as someone who's traveled the world
Hmm.
quite often. It has been so important to be able to get out of your bubble, like to be able to go to another country and to see how other people live. I think will really facilitate people's ability to be more accepting and more empathetic. That
Hmm.
is one thing I think Americans lack. We lack in our country. A lot of people in the middle of our country don't travel outside of their neighborhood
Yeah.
and have experiences with people to see everyone does things differently, and they're not all bad.
Hmm.
There's some cool things that happen around the
Oh yeah.
world.
Well, I mean, I think it's no coincidence that like most of my friends that are American are people that've got passports, because
Yeah.
it's people that have been willing, or had the fortune or whatever it is to go out and see the world outside of America. But I love America. I feel bad for it at the moment,
Yeah.
because of the choice it made a few years ago, and it's been stuck with that. And I really hope that good
There's
will
a
triumph.
fear. There was an article that I was reading that made us basically made a claim that the fear for a lot of conservative Americans that are tied to
Hmm.
the president in office currently, that America will die should this president not continue. That
I
America
mean,
will, and I don't feel that way, but
It's gotten to a point where if a car has the American flag on it these days, I think, oh, that's a Trump supporter. I mean, that's how fucked up it's got.
actually, that's a very accurate way
No,
of
I know,
looking
but
at
isn't that sad?
it. It's very
Isn't
sad.
that
It's
incredibly
very sad.
sad?
Yeah, yeah, it's very sad.
And all
It's
this.
actually it's very telling.
Well, it is very
It's
telling.
very
It's
telling.
very telling because it's like the people that don't get the thing about the flag and athletes kneeling and all of that sort of stuff. It's like if all you're bothered about is a piece of cloth, then that's literally all it is. It's a piece of cloth. The piece of cloth is meant to represent something, and it's not representing what it's meant to represent at the moment. And that's why people are not standing proudly to it. It's not because they what they don't respect your grandfathers or anything like that. They fought for freedom and liberty for everybody, and
Yeah.
that's what that flag represents. It no longer represents that at the moment, so that's why they're kneeling.
I thought of something that I wanted to ask you, which was it's a question that I presented. I pose a lot of questions on some of my social media,
Yeah.
and as a Black person, I often expect things to not work in my favor.
Right.
And the reason I think that is because of conditioning and being raised as a Black person in America, where our parents, specifically the Black mother, usually tells us that we need to be prepared for the worst.
Mm-hmm.
We need to always have whatever we need, wherever you're going, know not to do this and know not to do this. So the self-policing is real.
Yeah.
As a Black trans woman, the self-policing is tenfold. And so have you experienced, and I know you're not a Black trans woman, but like, what has that ever crossed your mind in your life in terms of feeling like, I guess what I'm trying to see here is like the disconnect between our experiences, where have you ever felt living day to day that you felt like things were not accessible to you?
This was the thing that came up with Brandon as well. Like, this is what I really have gotten from these conversations. I mean, you know, when you talk about code switching and things like that, when, you know, people come in and it's, you know, Brandon's mum would tell him not to wear, he could go running, but he couldn't wear a hoodie after a certain time. You know, he could never leave the house without his ID and his phone. Shit like that. I don't fucking think about anything like that. Right? And that's what I've started to learn about white privileges. And, you know, I think the word privilege and white together, a lot of white people go, oh, that means, you know, I've got more money or whatever. It's nothing to do with that. It's not to do with finance.
It has nothing to do with finance.
It's to do with literal safety.
Yeah.
And it's to do with the fact that there's so many, like you're saying, how exhausting it is to constantly self-police and think about all these things. We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it makes it, I feel
which is why I think it's important when you're able to recognize that you don't have to do that, and that you can facilitate the safety of others that are around you. I mean, I think that's what we're supposed to do. I understand that sometimes it's like, you know, life and death situations where you don't want to be involved and don't want to get into something. But I think that what we're supposed to do is to help people see something, say something, and how do we make it more inclusive?
Inclusive is the word. And I think that, you know, one of the things that you guys, you touched on when you were talking, it's about what it throws up in people. And it's always about their fear and what it suggests about them.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, the men, I think, are worse than women in this particular instance. And when you talk about violence against trans women, and certainly violence against Black trans women, you know, I question what is this? What is this violent reaction about?
I know what it's about.
You tell me what you think it's about, because I'm really interested in talking about this.
I know what it's about.
Go on then.
It's about the shame is so deep and the shame is so policed that in order to protect oneself from something that is in the mind, men that are harmful to trans women, they commit these heinous acts because they're afraid of someone finding them out or knowing what they're interested in or using that against them. It takes currency away from them. It takes power away from them. So if the world is run by cis white men, then Black cis men can't afford to lose any more power than what they've already lost being Black. Right. And so growing up, it's like, how dare I choose to be feminine or choose to be a woman, when it's like, you're equating choice with truth and destiny and authenticity, and you completely don't see it and don't get it. But it's just so important to know that these crimes committed against trans women like myself are all out of fear. Because if they weren't afraid of themselves, they wouldn't be harming us. I've met so many men that have said to me, and this happens often in my dating life, and like I posted a very interesting conversation, an exchange that I had just recently with a gentleman that I met on the street. You know, he was attracted to me and interested, and he got my, you know, my number. And it was very much like, as this exchange is happening, I already know the play by play. I already know the playback. I already know what's going to happen. But I indulge because I have hope and I believe that somewhere someone will transcend all the BS and they'll
Hmm.
think for themselves. And it's usually non-American men. However, this
Well, that
guy,
doesn't
you know,
surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. I know you're saying like that, but it doesn't surprise me. It's something else we could talk about. But yeah, I
yeah,
think
but this guy,
toxic masculinity in America is terrible. But anyway,
it's so terrible. It's
yeah,
horrible. It's
yeah.
awful. Like, take it off the menu. Like, don't serve this dish anymore. We don't need it. It's not helping us serving anyone. It's not,
No one's
it is an
impressed.
illusion. No one's impressed. And so the conversation went from complete and utter excitement and joy and you're beautiful and you're, wow, you know, he said something like you're beautiful inside and out. And there often tends to be some sort of accolades because that's how men approach women, and I get it. But then I said to him, thank you. And I also said, I like to be upfront and honest. I'm a trans woman. It may not seem apparent. And I say that also because it's not always apparent to people. So I affirm what it is. And then I just left it at that. And then I waited for him to respond. And in his response, he was very polite. And I think that people these days are equating politeness with a pass. And I don't think, it is okay to be nice in your delivery and
Hmm.
polite, but it's really about the root of what you're thinking and how you feel about something. And this pulls up for me transphobia and the different levels of transphobia. There's like
Hmm.
extreme, and then there's like, bubbling transphobia. And so he says to me, like, well, I mean, wow, okay, you are a beautiful, you're a beautiful person to me. And so he like sort of brings me down to person. He's like, you're a beautiful person to me. And I'm generalizing what he said, but it was basically like, I'm 100% straight man and, take care, or like, have a good night. And it was this
Yeah.
dismissiveness. And it was the conversation of, you don't realize that it's okay if you're not informed about trans women. It's okay if you don't have any experiences with trans women. All those things are valid. What is not valid, in my opinion, and many people's opinions, is dismissing my womanhood
Hmm.
and dismissing the fact that you were so cool with me
Yeah.
from jump. We conversation, get, all of those little things, and as they build, they have the potential to go down the road of maybe we're seeing each other, maybe we're dating each other.
Hmm.
I personally believe that it's always important to let someone know at some point, because I am not ashamed. I mean, listen, everyone's different, but I'm not ashamed of my journey and where I've come
Hmm.
from. I'm very much proud of the struggle, but for safety reasons, you have to know at some point.
Hmm.
And I just wish that we could get more conversations with cis men about, it does not take away your manhood. It does not take away your masculinity
Yeah.
for being connected to, talking to, being attracted to a trans woman.
Well, yeah, and taking away that equation, taking away that the fact that his response, when you say you're a trans woman, his response is, I'm 100% straight, and it should be okay. So we're compatible, right? It
Right,
should be that,
right, right.
and it isn't that because of like the societal kind of like, the most straight men's fear about homosexuality, and that reflecting back on
But
them,
was it
and
ever driven in?
not
Go
being able
ahead,
to
sir.
separate those two things as well.
Yeah.
Not,
I,
they're choosing your identity for you,
yes,
whereas you've just told them how you identify.
yes, yes. Um, it's also, did you ever feel as a boy growing up that you were told, maybe by parents or by the boys around you, the do's and don'ts of what it means to be a man? And when I say that, it's really there's guy code, and it
Yeah,
really is. The guy code is so hot, it's so high for, especially for cis black men
yeah,
in the world, that are like, these conflicting desires lead them to killing us. for no reason. And usually when there's a narrative, you know, in the police report or on the news about us, it's always like the trans panic defense, which is what we talk about, where they're like, I didn't know, or I wasn't aware of. And I just honestly, 80 to 90 to 95% of the time, they know what they're doing and what they're getting into and what's going on. It's like, you know, you just don't want other people to know. So I totally jumped what I want.
No. It comes out, for them, it comes out of almost like a humiliation. They feel somehow humiliated, and they've created that for themselves. And the pressure of how they're perceived by other men, basically.
And I think that's huge. Do you ever feel challenged or threatened? I know you're a married man and you have children and you might be in a different space with your life, but like you also have very prominent work. And that challenge is real for men to feel like they're living up to other men's standards. I
mean, I have to say, I grew up with 3 sisters. And I've got 3 daughters. So like female energy is a big thing in my life. And I didn't have a brother growing up, so I didn't have this, and my dad was a pastor. So it was like, I wasn't really having this checking in with them. There wasn't a big alpha male kind of presence or pressure in my life. And, you know, I felt comfortable within that. In fact, I almost felt when I was growing up that I was the lucky one, because I was the one who got to see, like when my sisters brought their friends home, I got to find out what it is girls talk about.
So you got a little insight.
I got a bit of inside information. I also feel like, you know, I've grown up, I've got a lot of platonic female friends, because that is a dynamic that I'm really used to and I'm really comfortable with. Whereas I've got some male friends who have got hardly any platonic female friends, because their mind can't stop thinking about sex. And being that way kind of inclined. And weirdly, those are people that have grown up with men.
Wow.
I know.
That was a word.
That
catch it. Did y'all catch that? That was a word.
That was those are people that grown up with men. So I think I think I haven't grown up in that traditional testosterone fueled kind of like, be it this is how men, you know. In fact, I've always kind of like been sort of prided myself on not being like that in a weird sort of way, and being a bit of a geek or a nerd or whatever. And just, I'm very comfortable with, and always have been very comfortable about how I identify and about my sexuality. But it's never been to the point where I feel aggressively like I have to prove it.
Right. Or you have to defend it.
Or I had to defend it. And like, for example, I've acted in plays and played gay characters, and I've had to have, you know, kissing scenes with men and whatever. It's not, and some of my friends would be like, oh, what was that like? And I'd be like, it's fine. It's just, you know, a bit stubbly, but it's fine. You know, it's just, it's also
the fear of losing something. It's kind of parallel to the experience of some conservative Americans with this idea that, like, if I were to let go and if I were to allow and let things be, and or move into a direction where we're making space for feelings or people or any of those things, it's the fear of losing something that's not really there.
Well, I think that drives a lot of everything in the world, but certainly like in America, you know, racism exists because it's like, well, if we let them in, then you know, what am I going to lose? What does it take away? And when you're talking about creating space for people, I feel like the most conservative people, the people that we're really up against it in terms of trying to change their mindset, is that they feel like they're going to lose something, like what's being taken away from me. And I think that that's endemic in racism. I think it's, you know, obviously it happens with people that don't understand the LGBT movement. And it's just, and again, it's about fear. It's about fear of losing out on something by accepting someone else. And I
don't think that you have to.
You don't have to. There's room for everybody. There's room for everybody. You know, and that's what is the most frustrating thing from me as a cis white man, like wanting to do something, wanting people to be better, and knowing that, you know, I've got shit to learn. But like,
I wanted to also ask you, how do you feel like that? Have you experienced, what has that been like in Hollywood? I know that I have a lot of, myself included, but I have a lot of sisters trans sisters in Hollywood,
Hmm.
you know, Pose and Orange is the New Black and Laverne Cox and MJ Rodriguez and Trace Lissette and a lot of my sisters that are very close to me, you know, we're constantly always experiencing there's a push, there's a breakthrough,
Hmm.
yet I always feel like there's still a lot of people who just don't support, who don't get it, who don't
Yeah.
allow us to come into the spaces and even be a part of the conversation in terms of like when you're casting roles.
Hmm.
There are still people casting roles for trans parts when they're not casting trans people, and also forgetting to cast certain trans women in roles that are not specifically trans. That's
Hmm.
okay. You can cast a woman in a woman's role, and I feel like that is so simple, but why
Yeah.
is it so difficult, seemingly difficult?
I don't know. I mean, because people in Hollywood, people try and do the right thing all the time, but it always feels so fucking temporary. It always feels
Yeah.
like, oh, this is what's going at the moment, so we need to address it. And like by giving it a short attention span, and something happens from it, and you think, oh, progression's happened, but there's no follow up.
No follow up.
There's no follow up. So it's like, oh yeah, well no, we fixed that, and it's like, well, you didn't. You
And
helped.
that's exactly what we started this conversation off discussing, which
Yeah.
was the continuous, this is a marathon sort of aspect
Yeah.
of this. We can't, you can't just fix it. You can fix it, but it's not going to be something like, oh, I put someone in there. It's not about
Yeah.
tokenism. It's not about just giving, you know, someone something for a moment and saying like, here, we threw you a bone. It really is about having trans people and or LGBTQ plus people in the writing room,
Hmm.
on set, you know,
Yeah.
in the crew, in hair and makeup, in every facet. And that's what we're saying as Black people. We need to see that as well. There needs to be
Yeah.
a Black person in all these writing rooms.
Yeah.
I don't understand how in 2020 there can be rooms that don't involve Black and brown people, and those people can have. I don't
I mean,
understand that.
yeah, I can't get my head around that either. I mean, I feel blessed that I've been in a show that's been really sort of well represented from the ground up for the last few years, but I'm also fully aware that's not the
That's
norm.
not the case, and that's not the
You
norm for
know, it's
everyone.
not the case. And, you know, if we're storytellers, which I believe we are,
Yeah.
then you want your story to be as authentic as possible. Otherwise, it just becomes like,
Well, if you ever need a storytelling lounge singer, please give me a
are you fucking kidding me? I go
call.
always, always.
I don't know. I have sort of I have a weird obsession with being a lounge singer in a show for something. I don't know why, but this has always been like one of
Well,
my things.
leave that with me because I do happen to own a piano bar in my show. So
Yes, I know. If you ever need a gorgeous, mysterious chanteuse,
yeah,
I love. I love
COVID friendly as well.
COVID. Listen, I will come with a silk mask. And all of you, and I love that you also sing and that you are such. I must admit that like I'm so glad we're doing this and everyone is getting to witness our budding friendship. But I love that you are someone that has a great sense of humor and you're also musically inclined and just well-rounded individual, and like that's so cool. Like that's
Oh,
yeah,
thanks, Mila.
you don't need anything from me, trust. You don't need any accolades from me.
No,
But yeah.
that's really sweet of you to say. No, I mean, I've fallen back in love with music in the last few years because I used to play a lot when I was a kid and sing a lot in the church.
Yeah.
But then when I started acting, there's a very sort of definitive, you either could do musical theatre or you do straight acting.
They do
And
that to you.
yeah, and so I went down the straight acting route, and so I forgot I could sing basically for years, and I convinced myself that I wasn't, you know, as brilliant a singer as these West Enders, and so I just thought, oh no, I don't sing. But then it became part of Lucifer, and it's really kind of I've fallen back in love with it again, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel euphoric. I think music is really fucking important. Because where there's a lot of miscommunication in the world, one thing that people do agree on is music.
Even
A
if
lot
we
of the
don't
time.
listen to it the same way and we don't
Yeah,
interpret it the same way, it puts us on the same page.
absolutely, absolutely, and that's, you know, all power to that.
Well, yeah, I just I really am glad that we're able to have this kind of conversation, and I hope this is helping some people around the world
Yeah, I
to think
do.
about things, because I'm full of questions and I'm full of curiosity, and I love to hear about, you know, people's different perspectives and where you come from, and how things affect you. And I know how things have affected me, and even though they haven't always been kind, and they're not always often very friendly or good or healthy, I'm able to sort of sometimes take a step back and look at it for what it is, and just, yeah, like look at it for what it is. And I think that
Yeah.
that's something that I don't think that not everyone can do, and not a lot of people can do. But you know, it's just
Well, I think
I really appreciate.
it's important that we root each other out and have these conversations. And like, you know, people that are willing to have this conversation, the more we talk, hopefully the more people will listen. You know, and I think doing things like this is really, really important.
Yeah.
Really
Um,
important. I'd love to do it again, Mila.
we will. Let's try.
Yeah,
Let's make it happen. It's good.
for sure.
It's something that I think will keep the ball rolling and keep things
I think
moving
we have to.
in a good direction. And I'm so thankful that we were able to do something like this. And you are so busy, but you're so kind. And
Oh,
I know that, you know, all of the fans from Brazil and all over the place are like,
the
they're like,
Brazil, very popular in Brazil. Yeah.
you're very popular in Brazil.
Yeah,
They're
very
like,
popular. It's all the Catholic countries. They're obsessed with the devil. That's what it is.
do you know someone had the nerve to sort of try to throw me under the bus because I mentioned we were having a conversation, and I don't know where they were coming from, but they were basically saying, you know, there are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there and a lot of people who are into propaganda, and they're like, you know, you're going to talk to the devil and Lucifer, and you know, and that's not right, and you know, and how has that affected you, being someone who I know you get this question every single
No, no,
time
it's
you
not
do
the
it.
question. It's just those people.
It's like, I guess you must have known when you walked into this part, into this role, and you were like, well, like everyone's gonna look at me and
I mean, I think, like I've said before,
blame
like,
the
I think I would
devil.
be naive to think that certainly in the States that I wouldn't take apart like Lucifer and not hear from people about how bad that was.
Right.
But you know, the
And you
majority
know,
of the
half
people.
of them, it's a guilty pleasure. You know that.
Oh, totally. I mean, listen, the most satisfying like comments I get about the show are actually from people of faith who've
Yeah.
seen through the stuff that people want to get caught up on, and
Yeah.
they've seen the bigger picture and they actually take. There are things about our show that are like I think are really important, you know,
Yeah.
and really kind of like they
Yeah.
say something quite important, and it's about reflecting on yourself and taking responsibility and ownership for you and your mistakes and what you put into the world, and don't try and palm it off on anybody else.
But I do think, sorry, side note, I just had a
That's okay.
side note. I do think that when we discuss with a lot of heavy religious indoctrination, it
Hmm.
doesn't really allow much room for people to do that, to
Hmm.
think about themselves and how they affect the situations that they encounter. Because really, change a situation is really about how you act, how you react to it.
Hmm.
And a lot of religious sort of doctrine has made people feel like rigid,
Hmm.
and not, and I don't believe you can't flow like a river if you're rigid. You have
You
to
can't.
bend.
Well, and you can't. I don't believe that if you're rigid, you can love everybody either.
No, I don't think you can.
Because you know, if you're rigid, people are going to step outside of the boundaries that you set, and that's again,
And
that's
that's
not what it's about. It's
disaster
about
waiting
all
to happen.
encompassing. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
There was a song they used to sing. So it's called "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands," and that's basically what it is. It's like it's about the
Yeah.
bigger picture. It's about everybody. Anyway, we humans, we like to mess things up a lot.
We do what we do, but in the meantime, we try to make some space for each other, make sense of it all, and, like, you
We
know,
do, we
shout out
do,
to all
and
those groups.
safe space is super important. Because I think people
Yes.
want, and I genuinely believe that there are lots of people out there who would like to know more and like to ask questions, but they're scared of saying the wrong thing.
And I will tell you this, never be scared to ask, at least to me, never be scared to ask me the questions or any questions, because I do understand education and understanding that we have to talk about things to learn and to grow and to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something that someone told me the other day, and I think it's a James Baldwin quote, and I may butcher it a little bit, but not everything you face you can change, but you can't change anything you don't face.
That's a really great
Those are my words of wisdom
quote.
for today.
Love it.
Not everything you face you can change, but you can't change anything you don't face. And if you don't ask and if you don't present, how can you expect to change it?
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Oh, thanks, Mila.
It was
so lovely.
And tell your wife I said hi.
I will do.
Please, and
hopefully when either we're in New York or you're over here, we can meet up and have a COVID-friendly drink somewhere.
We'll have a COVID-friendly mask moment. I would really, absolutely love that. I think that would be beautiful and brilliant. And again, I think it's important to have these talks with people that make space and that are feeling connected. And I think that's what I hope for. Someone asked earlier in this live a question of like, what were my desires? And my desires are literally, I saw this question pop up, but my desires are literally to help bridge this gap, to connect people, to put an end to the stereotypes that people have, especially about Black trans women. I believe that we are a gift, and I believe we have a lot to offer the world, and everyone should know a Black trans woman. I don't know why people,
Amen.
know more than one of us. But I'm so happy this happened, and thank you so much. And we'll do it again.
Much. Yeah, we will, for sure. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you everybody for coming on. Sending you all
Mila, I've got to record this, haven't I? How do I do that?
Yes, so when you're going to give him a little tutorial. When you end, it'll give you an option that will say save video. You'll save it, and then you can post it after you've saved it, and all that stuff. And if you don't know anything about me, you guys can follow me on @TheMilaJam. You can also stream any of my music on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music. Just search Mila Jam. I'm the only one. And I've got my eye on you.
That's my jam.
That's my jam.
That's my jam. All right, honey.
I'll talk to you later.
So lovely talking to you.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye.